Hi, my name is Dr. Rayshawn Ray, aiming to speak truth to power, and this is my daily thought. What is the Ferguson Effect, and why does it not hold water? So, the Ferguson Effect is this theory that when Michael Brown was killed and all of the media controversy around policing and police brutality led to police officers doing less policing. In other words, police officers were less likely to respond to calls, were less likely to engage in local communities, were less likely to engage in things like stop and frisk, things like the Republican nominee Donald Trump wants to continue and wants to actually see increase. So the Ferguson effect is the fact that because there is so much attention on police officers that they actually feel that the spotlight is on them more and that their job may be in jeopardy. Therefore, they're less likely to engage with suspects. They're less likely to do policing. They're less likely to do all these sorts of things. And recently, we had a Chicago cop who was shot, and one of the reasons why he said he was shot is because he was worried of what might happen if he actually engaged with the suspect and used force. We also had two police officers who were unfortunately killed recently. One who had been on the force for, I believe, about 40 years, and the other who had only been on the force about 18 months and had just had a 4-month-old child. I mean, these sort of incidents, I mean, are tragic, and it speaks to the civil wars that are happening on our streets every single day that Dr. Robert Vargas at the University of Notre Dame and I discussed in a recent op-ed on Public Radio International. But see, this is the problem with the Ferguson effect. While in theory it sounds good, right? It doesn't hold water, unfortunately, when we look at empirical research. So Dr. Matthew Desmond and some of his colleagues, Dr. Desmond is a professor at Harvard University and a recent MacArthur Fellow. MacArthur Fellows are anointed as being geniuses. They're given $1 million to do the research they think is important. Matt's work mostly focuses on poverty and what's happening in impoverished communities. And in one of his recent articles, what he was actually looking at is what is the impact of police brutality or a police killing on local communities and cities. And he did this research in Milwaukee, which is quite fitting because recently Milwaukee, similar to Baltimore and St. Louis, has seen an increase in crime, in violent crime in particular. And what Dr. Desmond and his colleagues actually find is that when there was a really horrific police brutality incident, and after that incident, 911 calls plummeted. In other words, people were less likely to call the police because either A, they didn't think that the police would do anything, or B, they were actually worried that something would happen to them, right? And I mean, we've seen this in other cities. So take what happened in Baltimore recently, where a man actually called the police and said, "I need help." It was unclear what was going on with him at that particular time, but it was clear that he was very disturbed. He called the police. Next thing you know, he ends up getting beaten to death by the police. Beaten to death after he called them for help. And so part of the issue we have is that when people call the police for help, and there have been several incidents like this, that unfortunately the people calling for help or the people calling for a person, that person who might be mentally unstable, might have some type of issues going on cognitively, end up being seriously hurt or killed. So in places like Chicago, where Laquan McDonald, or it's been a series of incidents, I mean, these are just some of the more popular ones, Mike Brown in Ferguson, Freddie Gray in Baltimore, these are just the popular incidents that happen, that when these sort of incidents happens, it leads to people being less likely to trust the police across the city. Right? This isn't just among black people. I mean, 911 calls plummet more in black communities, and that makes sense, but it also plummets writ large because everyone is looking at these incidents and saying that should not have happened. Now, this is the thing. While we're sitting up and looking at all these big incidents that blow up regionally or nationally or internationally, there are tons of incidents that happen on a smaller basis that speak to some of these issues. And so, unfortunately, this type of treatment happens on a regular. And we saw that with the Department of Justice reports about Ferguson and about Baltimore, showing egregious forms of racial discrimination and the number of stops and the treatment that individuals are receiving, despite the fact overwhelmingly the people in these communities are not committing violent crime and are not engaging in any types of crime. This speaks to a recent Pew study finding that blacks are much less likely to trust the police and have confidence in the police than whites do. And I mean, these sort of things, it just has to stop. So this is the thing. The underreporting of crime possibly doesn't happen so much because of this whole not snitching culture, right? This perception that that people don't want to tell on someone, when instead it could be that people actually face grave consequences if they do tell on someone. But in spite of that, what it all comes back to is police brutality and the way that certain people in certain communities are treated relative to people in other neighborhoods and in other communities. So while whites are having very positive and lucrative interactions with police officers writ large on average, whether that be in their own neighborhoods, at church, at their children's schools, blacks and Latinos are having very different interactions with the police officers. And unfortunately, statistics show that these are overwhelmingly negative, even when individuals are not engaging in with anyone, right? I was recently talking to a friend, and he was saying, well, wow, look at this incident. I mean, that this guy killed these two cops and the cops didn't kill him. Okay, that is extremely unfortunate that these cops were killed. I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, we do not want to see cops killed. But at the same time, people shouldn't get a medal for saving someone's life, right? And then, writ large, we're not talking about incidents like that. We're talking about incidents where no one did anything. Like in Charlotte, like in Tulsa, where no one was doing anything violent, and yet and still they ended up being killed. So, I mean, this is my daily thought. Conversations matter like Black Lives in books, and I hope this has sparked one. The Ferguson Effect simply doesn't hold water. Instead, it comes back to police brutality. When are we going to change it?